Quick video about the deadline. We only had one trade this year and it involved the Toronto Scepters and Montreal Victoire. The Toronto Scepters sent forward Caitlin Willoughby to the Montreal Victoire for defender Anna Shelbin. This deal caught me by a bit of a surprise as I didn't hear any rumors about Toronto being in the mix until right before the deadline. I was wondering why there wasn't any discussion going on about them acquiring a D given that they only had 6 before this happened. The early rumors I saw involved Montreal shopping both Dominika Lashkova and Anna Shelbin, which I expected because they had 8D before this and I knew they had to make a move for a forward. And I saw that the Ottawa Charge were in the mix, shopping around specifically Anna Meixner. I was wholeheartedly thinking that Montreal and Ottawa were going to agree to a deal because funny enough, one of my mock trades before this deadline involved Montreal trading Shelbin to Ottawa for Meixner, and I really thought that was going to happen. I also just realized that with that trade, you'd be trading the captain of Team Austria for the captain of Team Sweden. With that move, Ottawa would get a right-handed D, which I've been talking about how they really need right now. As of right now, they only have one right-handed D on their roster, and that's Ashton Bell. Plus, Shelbin's fiancée, Ronya Savalainen, plays for Ottawa, and I thought this would be a fun way to reunite them. For Montreal, they would get a speedy forward to add to their depth, who hasn't really thrived over in Ottawa and could possibly use a fresh start. Some help with their depth is definitely what Montreal needs right now, given that before this deadline they only had 12 forwards. The concern I would have had with Ottawa making this move is that then they would have become the team with 8D and then they would have had to make a second move, which I wouldn't have been surprised if they tried to do, but Mike Hirschfeld did come out around when the deadline passed and talked about how they believe strongly in the group they have, and they're excited to battle for a playoff spot for the final few games. Ottawa has picked up their game as of late, so I'm not completely surprised that they decided not to split up their core. I had multiple potential trades in my head of what could go down involving Ottawa, specifically them acquiring Anna Shelbin for D as well as some forwards. With possible expansion pending, I even had them potentially moving Gwyneth Phillips because if there's an expansion draft, it's very likely that a team will snag her up. And with the way that she's played this season, I thought maybe they ship her off, potentially get something for her rather than nothing, maybe upgrade their depth. But it looks like they're deciding to stay put. They must feel pretty confident with where they are. Before the deadline passed, I was talking with Czech Women's Hockey Report over on Instagram. If you don't follow them, make sure you do. We were talking about how Ottawa has publicly come out and said that it wouldn't be a big deal if they didn't make the playoffs this season. It seemed possible that maybe Ottawa would have pulled the trigger and tried to acquire Dominika Lashkova this season rather than wait till free agency, which by that point I think that she is going to go to Ottawa. With Shelbin now off Montreal's roster, I think Lashkova is going to get some more opportunities to play, although it may still be as the 7th D because she didn't play for over a year. This time around, I just couldn't think of a logical piece that Ottawa could send Montreal's way to acquire Lashkova, but expect her to sign with Ottawa in free agency. Count on it. Anyways, let's try and get back on track and what actually happened over the deadline. When I first saw the deal go down, I was thinking, whoa, wait a minute, what is Montreal doing? They're giving up the Swedish captain for a player who spent all of this season as the 13th forward? But when I looked at it and actually analyzed it more, it made perfect sense. Toronto acquires a player who's been scratched a few times this season, and when she has gone to the lineup, most of the time has played as the 7th D. She'll add some needed experience to their depth, and possibly help the younger players out. I don't know if her ice time will necessarily go up after how much she was playing in Montreal. She was averaging just under 11 minutes of ice time over in Montreal. I don't think that's going to change much. Montreal gets a player who's spent all the season only playing around 4 to 5 minutes a game, but she'll ensure their forward depth even if it's only as the 13th forward. Keep in mind that Montreal still has Alexandra Labelle on long-term injury reserve, and I still don't know when she's going to come back, but when she does, I think it's possible that Willoughby is the one that's cut. I don't know if she's going to go to the reserve list or if she's going to be cut altogether because Montreal has 3 players on the reserve list and they're all Quebec natives. In Toronto, Sarah Nurse is still on long-term injured reserve, but I think she may be returning soon. If this trade didn't happen, I was certain that Willoughby was going to be the one that was being reassigned to the reserve list. Recently, Toronto did lose Lauren Bernard over to New York, but at the same time, they did free up a roster spot so they don't have to release somebody completely for when Nurse returns. Now the cut candidates are likely going to be either Anna Shelbin, Rylan McKinnon, Noemi Norbarova or Laura Kluge. I mispronounced her name as Kluge in a previous video. I'd say it's likely that Kluge is the one that's cut because you probably don't want to cut down to 6D again by cutting one of the D. And both Norbarova and Shelbin have restricted free agency after this season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you reassign a restricted free agent to the reserve list, you lose their 2-year draft rights. Speaking of restricted free agency, when this deal did go down, my concern was that Montreal was losing the Shelbin, who was a restricted free agent, for an unrestricted free agent. But looking at how both players were in depth roles and not getting a huge amount of ice time, the deal makes perfect sense for both sides. I'm not solely convinced that Montreal would have re-signed Shelbin at this point, and I don't think Toronto will either, because I think they'll look to add a better D in the draft. But what are your thoughts on this trade? What would you grade it? For Toronto, I'd give it a B, I think, because they definitely needed a 7th D, and Shelbin has a lot of experience. On Montreal's side, I think I'd only probably give it a C, because I don't think Willoughby is going to come in and impact a whole lot, and it's likely that she does get cut once LaBelle is ready to come back. Do you agree with that assessment? Leave a comment below and we'll talk about it. This is my final trade deadline analysis. Please give it a like if you enjoyed, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more PWHL content. Be sure to also follow me over on Instagram, X, and TikTok, all at PWHL Source. Enjoy the rest of the PWHL season. Until then, I'll see you next time.